Tonight, we travel back to a world where winter wasn't just a season, but a silent, unforgiving enemy. Imagine nights so cold and dark that every breath feels like frost, where the fire's glow is a lifeline and the slightest flicker of warmth means survival. This is the world of medieval peasants, ordinary people facing extraordinary hardship, living on the edge of the cold, with only their faith, their neighbors, and their own stubborn strength to keep them alive. There were no heaters or blankets made for comfort, no endless stores of food or wood. Instead, there was grit, silence, and quiet acts of kindness, whispered prayers, shared scraps, and stolen moments by the dying embers of a candle. Every night was a test, every morning a hard-won victory. So settle in close, listen for the crunch of footsteps in snow, feel the hush of frozen fields, and walk with me through the coldest nights of a time when warmth was precious and hope the fiercest fire of all. The cold comes early, first frost and final preparations. The breath of autumn faded into a brittle chill that slipped under the threadbare tunics and cloaks of the village. Dawn broke slowly, pale and muted, beneath a sky smeared with the soft gray of gathering clouds. The air was still, but the promise of frost hung heavy, a cold whisper threading its way through the fields and thatched rooftops, creeping silently over the land like a slow-moving tide. It was a quiet urgency, the kind that pulled at every soul tethered to the earth. The peasants knew what it meant. The cold was coming early this year, earlier than memory, and with it, the long, relentless hunger of winter. In the village, the small cottages huddled together like birds seeking shelter, their wooden beams darkened by years of smoke and rain. Thatched roofs, worn and thinning, caught the first frost in a delicate crust of white. The once vibrant greens of summer had faded to muted browns and grays, and the fields lay barren, their black soil turned hard and cracked by the cold creeping beneath the surface. The crops were gone now, saved or lost to the elements. What remained was the final, desperate work before the land rested. Peasants emerged from their homes at first light, faces weathered and lined by years of toil, eyes sharp with the knowledge of what was to come. There was no warmth yet inside the cottages, just the last embers of the fire from the night before, cold ash and the faint scent of smoke lingering in the hearth. They dressed quickly in coarse wool and layered linen, their fingers stiff and red as they gathered tools and baskets. Outside, the world was brittle with frost, and every breath came as a soft, white cloud in the air. The work was urgent. Roofs needed patching before the first heavy snows buried the village beneath an unforgiving weight. Straw and reeds were gathered from the fields, bundled tight, and tucked carefully under the worn thatch to fill the cracks where the wind seeped in. The roofs were a patchwork of repairs, each village home a testament to the resourcefulness of those who lived within, worn yet sturdy, patched again and again against time and weather. Inside the cottages, root vegetables were harvested and stored with great care. Turnips, parsnips, carrots, and onions were lifted from the cold earth, their rough skins streaked with soil, the scent faintly sweet and earthy. Some were placed in wooden bins lined with straw. Others hung from rafters and twisted ropes, drying slowly in the cool air. These humble stores were the lifeblood of winter meals, a precious reserve against the days when fields lay buried and hungry mouths needed feeding. Firewood, the precious currency of warmth, was stacked in uneven piles near each door, chopped from nearby forests in frantic last efforts before snow made the woodlands impassable. Yet no matter how hard they worked, there was never quite enough. The memory of last winter's long nights, fingers numbed by cold, smoke-darkened faces and the hollow ache of hunger, haunted every stack and every bundle. Each piece of wood was precious, hoarded for nights when the wind roared like a beast and the cold crept through the smallest cracks. The village's well was already starting to freeze at the edges, its dark water a thin mirror beneath the early morning frost. Buckets were filled quickly to carry inside, for water was essential not only for cooking and cleaning, but for the fires that would burn through the night. The risk of illness rose sharply in the cold months, and fresh water was a fragile defense against the creeping maladies that preyed on weakened bodies. Children, wrapped in layers too big for their small frames, watched the bustle of preparation with wide, curious eyes. Their breaths misted in the air as they clung close to mothers or older siblings, learning early the rhythms of survival. The old tales told by firelight came to mind, stories of frozen nights when the snow fell thick and silence swallowed the world, of wolves prowling just beyond the trees, and of families huddled close in the dark, waiting for dawn. These tales were warnings, lessons etched into the heart of every child. Inside one cottage, an old woman moved slowly but deliberately, her hands steady despite years of arthritis. She carried baskets of dried herbs and bundles of flax to hang near the fire, their scent mingling with the smoke and the faint sweetness of burning straw. These simple herbs were part medicine, part comfort, their warmth a small balm against the harshness outside. Her eyes, bright and alert, scanned the window where frost was beginning to lace the glass in delicate patterns, a silent herald of the nights ahead. The men gathered near the village edge, stacking the last of the wood with quiet urgency. Their breath came in frosty puffs as they worked, muscles taut beneath rough woolen shirts. They shared few words. There was little time and no need, but their nods and glances carried the weight of unspoken understanding. The cold would test them all, but the work must be done before darkness and frost ruled completely. As the day wore on, the sun rose higher but offered little warmth, its light pale and diffused through heavy clouds. Shadows lengthened early, and the village slowed under the pressing weight of impending night. Hearth fires were rekindled, and the scent of cooking filled the small homes. Soups of barley and salted meat, simple breads baked on stone, the faint tang of smoke curling upward through the thatch. At dusk, the village gathered quietly near the central hearth, the heart of the community. The warmth was thin but fiercely guarded, every ember cherished as a flicker of hope against the gathering cold. Lanterns were lit, their flickering flames small islands of light in the encroaching darkness. Outside, the wind began to rise, carrying the bite of winter on its breath. Through the thin walls, the peasants listened to the crackling fire and the murmur of voices, soft and low, weaving stories of seasons past and prayers for the months to come. The night was long, and the cold was only beginning. Tomorrow would bring new tasks, new struggles, but for now, there was a quiet acceptance, a shared resilience in the face of nature's relentless march. The first frost had come early, and with it, the final preparations. The peasants faced the cold not with bravado, but with steady hearts and careful hands, knowing that survival depended on every small effort. The cold was a living thing here, creeping beneath the doors, threading through the straw, sharpening the edges of shadows. It was a test, ancient and unforgiving, and the village held its breath, ready to endure. Life in a single room, smoked straw and shared space. Step inside the humble hut, where every inch of space is claimed, and every breath carries the weight of survival. This single-room world, constructed of rough timber and wattle and daub walls, feels smaller in the fading light, the low ceiling pressing close like a shroud. The scent is a thick tapestry of smoke, sweat, earth, and straw, a mingling of life's raw elements in a fragile balance. It is the world where family, animals, and warmth exist in tight, uneasy harmony. The hearth is the room's heart and soul, a dark pit dug into the packed earth, ringed with stones blackened by years of fire. Here, a small flame flickers low, glowing orange like a heartbeat against the surrounding shadows. The smoke curls upward, not through a chimney. Those were a luxury reserved for richer homes, but through the cracks in the roof and the gaps in the walls. It lingers heavily inside, filling lungs with its acrid bite, stinging eyes and searing throats. Yet it is the only warmth the family can claim. Without it, the cold would seep deeper, freezing flesh and bone in the long, bitter nights. Around the fire, the family gathers close. Parents sit against the wall, their backs resting on bundles of straw that serve as chairs and beds, their bodies bent from years of hard labor. Children press themselves to their parents' sides, seeking the scant heat that radiates outward. Little ones nestle under coarse wool blankets patched with fraying thread, their faces pale and wide-eyed in the firelight. The closeness is both comfort and necessity. Space is precious and scarce. Every breath shared tightens the air, a reminder of the fragile boundary between warmth and cold, life and hardship. In the shadows, chickens cluck softly, roosting on low perches made from rough branches. Their feathers ruffle with cold, but they remain a vital part of the household. not only for the eggs they provide, but as small living creatures that add a semblance of vitality to the darkened hut. Their soft clucking is a lullaby of sorts, a steady reminder of life amid the creeping silence. Occasionally, one stirs and scratches at the dirt floor, sending up tiny puffs of dust and straw. The floor itself is a patchwork of beaten earth, strewn with hay and straw to soften the hardness beneath. These layers of dried grass form a crude insulation against the cold that seeps upward from the frozen ground. Sleeping mats made from bundled straw offer little padding, but are precious nonetheless, cradling weary bodies through the long, shivering hours. The smell is sharp, of damp earth, smoke, and sweat, a scent that settles deep into skin and clothing, marking the family's existence in this world. Light is sparse, filtering dimly through small, shuttered windows patched with animal hide or oiled cloth. Candles are rare and precious. Often the fire itself is the only illumination, casting flickering shadows that dance across the rough walls. These shadows play tricks on the eyes, making the space feel even smaller, more crowded with unseen shapes. The outside world is far away here, reduced to muffled sounds carried on the wind, the howl of a distant wolf, the creak of trees bending beneath frost. Every movement inside the hut makes its presence known, the scrape of feet on straw, the soft rustle of cloth, the quiet shuffle of hands gathering kindling. Even the smallest sound echoes in the confined space, a reminder that nothing can be wasted or ignored. The family's routine revolves around the fire, tending it with small twigs and scraps of wood, coaxing life from cold embers, and ensuring the smoke never overwhelms their fragile sanctuary. Food is modest and sparse. A simple stew simmers over the fire, a murky broth of root vegetables and salted meat, its aroma faint but comforting. The clinking of wooden bowls and the scrape of spoons against rough-hewn wood fill the air, punctuated by quiet murmurs or the occasional cough from a child struggling against the chill. Every bite is savored, a small victory in the battle against hunger and cold. The shared space means privacy is a forgotten concept. Walls offer little more than the illusion of separation. Family members lie close, their bodies pressed together in layers of clothing and blankets to conserve heat. Illness and fatigue spread easily in such close quarters, and the threat of disease lingers as a constant shadow. Yet in this proximity, there is also profound intimacy. Whispered prayers for protection, soft lullabies hummed into the night, and the steady rhythm of breath and heartbeat. The hut's walls tell stories etched into their very fibers. Marks from tools, scratches from restless children, and the faint traces of past repairs bear witness to lives spent enduring. The ceiling, dark with smoke and soot, is a testament to countless nights spent warding off the cold, the blackened timbers a reminder of both vulnerability and resilience. Outside, the wind howls, rattling the thin walls and bending the fragile branches that shelter the home. Inside, the fire sputters, but does not die. The family clings to this small flame, a beacon in the night that promises survival against the cold's relentless assault. The smoke thickens and eyes water, but the warmth lingers in their bones, a fragile thread holding them to life through the dark hours. As the night deepens, the hut falls into a rhythm of quiet endurance. Children drift into restless sleep, their bodies curled against parents who whisper blessings and comfort. The adults sit awake longer, minds weighed by worry and hope, listening to the storm outside and the soft breathing of those they protect. The cold will come again tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. But for now, there is this shared refuge, this small island of warmth and life amid the vast, frozen wilderness. In this cramped, smoky space, the peasants survive not because they are strong alone, but because they are bound together, by blood, by struggle, and by the faint flickering light of a fire that refuses to die. Their survival is a testament to endurance, to small acts of care in the face of a world that offers little mercy. The cold is a constant adversary, but here, in the shelter of shared breath and whispered prayers, life holds on. What they wore, dirt-lined wool and hopes for spring. In the bitter grip of winter's darkest nights, what a medieval peasant wore was less a matter of fashion and far more a necessity etched in grime, texture, and endurance. Clothing was their first line of defense against the cold, a patchwork armor of wool, linen, and layers that spoke silently of hardship, resourcefulness, and an unyielding hope for spring's eventual return. The garments were worn, mended, and stained, not for vanity but for survival, each stitch a testament to the relentless rhythm of cold months endured. The foundation of a peasant's winter wardrobe was rough wool, coarse and heavy, often spun and woven from the sheep that grazed the hillsides near their village. These woolen tunics were thick but itchy, their fibers prickly against skin, not softened by modern washing or treatment. Over time, the wool became matted with dirt from long days working in the fields, soot from the ever-present fire, and grease from unwashed hands and household tasks. This layer of grime, far from a sign of neglect, was oddly protective. Mud and earth hardened the fabric, creating an insulating shell that trapped precious body heat. Underneath the wool, linen garments, shifts for women and simple undertunics for men, clung close to the skin. Linen was softer, but much thinner and less insulating. These underlayers, too, were rarely changed or washed, for water was precious and laundry was a luxury few could afford in the cold months. Instead, the linen absorbed sweat and smoke, gradually becoming stiff and stained. Yet it remained an essential barrier, wicking moisture away from the skin to keep chills at bay. Footwear was a similarly pragmatic affair. Peasant boots were roughly hewn from thick leather, often secondhand or repurposed from old sacks and animal hides. These boots were patched with strips of cloth or leather, fastened with crude stitches or simple twine. When the cold deepened, feet were wrapped in scraps of wool or linen, sometimes layered with straw pulled from bedding, to cushion and insulate. The soles were worn thin from constant trudging through mud, ice, and snow, offering little protection, but demanding tough endurance from their owners. The outer layers, cloaks and mantles, were the last shield against winter's bite. These cloaks were woven from the same wool, sometimes dyed in muted earth tones like brown, gray, or faded green, though bright colors were rare and reserved for special occasions or wealthier folk. Cloaks draped heavily over shoulders, often pinned with a simple wooden or metal brooch, and wrapped tightly around the body to block the wind. Over time, these cloaks gathered tears and patches, some sewn with desperation from leftover fabric, others stained with the muddy slush of the village streets. Yet they were indispensable, shielding their wearer from sleet and frost, turning away the cold with every fold. Gloves and hats were rarely separate items, but fashioned from scraps of cloth, knitted wool, or animal pelts. Caps, often knitted or sewn from worn cloth, pulled low over ears, muffling the bite of winter air. Gloves, if they existed, were fingerless or patched together from pieces of leather and cloth. Fingers curled instinctively into fists or tucked beneath sleeves, for the chill was relentless and unforgiving. Beneath the layers, the fabric was often stiff and uncomfortable, heavy with dirt and dried sweat. The constant presence of smoke from the hearth left clothes smelling faintly of char and ash, while the dirt and grease embedded deep into fibers told the story of labor and long days under a changing for the evening. There was no changing for the evening. Both shifted, adjusted like armor worn for battle. The peasants learned to tolerate the itch and the grime, for the alternative was exposure. At night, this layered clothing was pulled even tighter, sleeves rolled down, cloaks wrapped more snugly, and hoods pulled forward to shield from the chill that crept beneath even the thickest straw mattresses. Sometimes, families would share cloaks or wrap children in extra layers to conserve warmth, the fabric pressing close to skin in a patchwork of need and shared survival. The smell of wool and sweat mingled with the earthy scent of straw bedding and smoke-filled air, a sensory tapestry unique to these cold nights. The winter clothing was not just a physical barrier, but a psychological one as well. Each ragged patch and worn seam bore the mark of 100 small acts of care. The mother mending her child's torn sleeve by firelight, the father turning a frayed cloak inside out to hide the holes, the weaving of straw into boots to ease frozen toes. In these slow, repeated rituals, hope was stitched into the fabric, a quiet faith that spring would come again, and with it, new wool, fresh linen, and perhaps a chance for cleaner clothes. For all their toughness, these garments were fragile reminders of the peasant's place in a harsh world. Wealthier villagers or townsfolk might sneer at the dirt and wear, but for the peasant, every thread was a shield against the cold that could kill as surely as hunger or sickness. clothing was layered survival, a tactile defense woven from the very earth they toiled and the sheep they tended. It was a second skin, one that bore the stains of life, but offered warmth enough to endure the longest nights. And so, through the coldest nights of the month, peasants adjusted their worn woolen tunics, tugged tighter at their layered cloaks, and accepted the dirt and grease that clung stubbornly to their bodies and clothes. They survived by habit, by necessity, and by a relentless hope that beneath the weight of wool and grime, spring awaited, promising renewal, warmth, and a fleeting chance to shed these heavy skins for lighter days ahead. The fire pit, sacred coals in the heart of the home. In the modest hut of a medieval peasant, the fire pit is not merely a source of warmth. It is the heart around which life pulses, the sacred center in a small, smoky universe. There is no chimney to guide the smoke skyward, no elaborate hearth to cradle roaring flames. Instead, smoke coils and lingers like a living thing beneath the low rafters, hugging the rough timber and settling on the thatched roof. This smoke, thick and pungent, is both a curse and a blessing, a constant companion that carries the scent of survival, a reminder that without fire, there is only cold silence. The fire pit itself is a shallow, earthen basin carved into the hard-packed floor, encircled by stones or simple clay to hold the wood and embers in place. This pit is a carefully tended altar, where flames flicker softly and coals glow red like tiny suns buried in ash. Each ember is a treasure, fiercely guarded, hoarded with the reverence of a precious jewel. To lose a fire in the dead of winter could mean more than discomfort. It could mean the difference between life and death in a season ruled by biting cold. Fuel for the fire is scarce and precious. Peasants gather dead branches, fallen twigs, or scraps of wood salvaged from broken tools and fences. Every splinter is weighed for its worth as kindling, every log stretched out to last through long nights. The crackling flames are watched with constant vigilance. A sudden gust of wind through a gap in the walls might threaten to snuff the fire. A careless stirring could scatter embers and reduce precious fuel to cold ash. It is a delicate balance, a nightly ritual of coaxing and tending that demands patience and attentiveness. Smoke fills the room in slow, curling waves, blurring the edges of flickering shadows on the walls. It stains the wood black and clings to skin and clothing, a permanent fixture of daily life. Yet, it also serves a quiet purpose. The smoke helps keep insects at bay, preserves meat hanging from wooden beams, and alerts the family to the fire's presence when the night falls deep and silent. Breathing in this smoky air becomes second nature, a harsh scent that speaks of hearth and home. Around the fire pit, the family gathers close, the low light painting their faces in warm orange hues. The fire's glow is both physical warmth and emotional solace, a fragile barrier against the relentless chill pressing in from outside. Children nestle into the laps of parents, sharing bodies for warmth, while the fire crackles low, casting long shadows that dance like spirits across the dark walls. Stories are told in murmurs, prayers whispered to saints for protection and heat. The fire is a gathering point, a silent witness to the quiet endurance of a peasant family holding back winter's grasp. Fueling the fire is not a one-person task, but a communal duty shared among all who live within the hut. Even children learn early to fetch kindling, to carefully add twigs without smothering flames, and to shield the glowing coals from cold drafts. This cooperation is essential. The fire is a living thing, needing constant care and respect. It is never left unattended, for a cold hearth means vulnerability to the dark and the cold, inviting sickness and despair. As embers burn low, the fire is carefully banked. Ash is gently spread to cover the coals, creating an insulating layer that keeps the heat alive through the night. Sometimes, a pot of water or a thick stew simmers above the flames, the bubbling liquid sending steam that mingles with smoke, thickening the warm air. This cooking fire feeds the family, providing nourishment and comfort, a reminder that even in harsh months, life must continue. The fire pit also serves as a symbol of continuity and hope. Through countless generations, these small fires have burned in village huts, passing from hand to hand like a sacred trust. When spring finally breaks winter's hold, the embers are not discarded but rekindled, each spark a small victory against the cold. The fire carries stories, warmth, and survival itself. its glow a beacon in the long nights that define the medieval peasant's year. In this smoky sanctuary, the peasant family rests, guarded by the sacred coals and the flickering flames that refuse to die. The fire pit is a humble altar, a testament to human resilience, a small, flickering light held fiercely against the cold, a promise that no matter how harsh the night, warmth and life endure. Sleeping with livestock, a warm pig is a blessed pig. Welcome back to your medieval evening, where your mattress is stuffed with straw, your windows are made of oiled parchment, and your heating system is roughly equivalent to what you'd find in a modern barn. Because, well, it is a barn, or close enough. Tonight's topic is a cozy one. Snuggle in, wrap your cloak a little tighter, and let's talk about how medieval peasants braved the frostiest nights of the month, not with fireplaces or radiators, but with hooves, snouts, and feathers. Yes, we're talking about the original hot water bottle, the humble pig. Now, let's set the scene. It's late January. The wind is howling like a banshee. Snow drifts press against the crude timber of your home, and your nose has been numb for 3 days. If you had a mirror, which you don't, because only the local lord has one, you'd see your breath fogging in the moonlight. Firewood is scarce, and you've already burned the family's broken tools and half of a wooden spoon. The hearth has gone out, but all is not lost. In the corner of your one-room hovel, rooting around in some straw and occasionally snorting in a vaguely judgmental way, is salvation, a pig. It might surprise you to learn just how effective pigs are at preventing death by frostbite. These hefty creatures generate a remarkable amount of body heat, and once you get over the initial squeamishness of cuddling with something that smells like old turnips and has the emotional intelligence of a mildly grumpy uncle, they're actually quite endearing. Pigs snore, yes, and they occasionally fart with the power of a small cannon, but they're warm. And in a world without central heating, warmth is sacred. Of course, pigs weren't the only roommates a peasant might have. The medieval peasant dwelling was often a longhouse or cruck house, and by design or desperation, it was a shared space. Humans slept at one end, animals at the other, or if it was especially cold, all together in a great tangle of limbs, hay, and mutual resignation. Goats bleated in their sleep, chickens jostled for position on beams or rafters, and the occasional cow added its own earthy aroma to the mix. The family dog, assuming it hadn't been bartered for grain, would curl up in someone's lap like a furry sentient hot stone. For many modern listeners, the idea of sleeping beside livestock conjures up unpleasant thoughts: mud, fleas, smells, and the ominous squelch of something unidentifiable underfoot. And yes, it was all of those things. But for the medieval peasant, it was also comforting. The presence of animals, familiar and warm, was a kind of living lullaby. The soft clucking of chickens, the low murmur of a contented goat, even the wheezing snort of a dreaming pig, all these became part of the night's soundtrack. Peasant homes were constructed with minimal insulation, often little more than wattle and daub walls with thatched roofs that leaked more than a gossip with a pint of mead. Wind whipped through gaps in the walls, mice ran freely, and the floor, if you were lucky, was packed earth, sometimes strewn with rushes that were replaced when they became truly unbearable. Under these conditions, the idea of cozy comfort had to be radically redefined. Comfort wasn't a crackling fireplace or a heated blanket. It was your own body heat, and the body heat of anything else willing to sleep next to you without charging rent. There was an accidental brilliance to this arrangement. Having animals inside the house, while undeniably smelly and chaotic, served multiple functions. Livestock represented wealth, and keeping them indoors meant they were less likely to be stolen or eaten by wolves in the night. It also made feeding and monitoring them easier during harsh weather. And of course, they gave off body heat, free, renewable, deliciously snorty body heat. Chickens, while not as cuddly as pigs, had their own charms. They weren't much help in heating the house, unless you could convince 30 of them to sleep on your chest, but they did contribute to a feeling of life and movement in otherwise bleak conditions. Plus, they laid eggs, a vital source of protein. Some peasants trained their hens to roost near the warmer parts of the room, not for the hens' comfort, mind you, but to make egg collection easier in the frozen dawn. Goats, on the other hand, were a mixed bag. On the plus side, they were warm and relatively small, On the downside, they had a habit of chewing on anything left unattended, including the hem of your only tunic or the corner of your blanket. They also stared at you while you slept with unnerving intensity, like furry little demons daring you to move. Still, you put up with them, because warm is warm, even if it's judging you. Now, let's not romanticize this too much. The medieval peasant didn't live in a pastoral wonderland of harmonious interspecies cuddling. Fleas were rampant. Bedding was straw, which inevitably became home to lice, bugs, and worse. Everything smelled faintly or strongly of manure. Disease spread easily in such tight quarters, and the noise could be incredible. Imagine trying to sleep while 3 chickens are roosting on a beam above your head, one of them developing a strong opinion about the moonlight and expressing it loudly every few minutes. But when your choice is snuggling a pig or freezing to death, you snuggle the pig. Interestingly, the idea of animals as warmth providers persisted for centuries. In some rural communities, the practice lasted well into the modern era. Folk wisdom celebrated the 3-dog night, a phrase that supposedly refers to how many dogs you needed to sleep beside to survive particularly cold conditions. Replace dog with goat or pig, and you've got the medieval version. To the outsider, the peasant's home might have seemed like chaos incarnate, a swirling mash of animal noises, human grumbles, smoky air, and itchy straw. But for those who lived it, this was just normal, familiar, even, dare we say it, cozy. The rhythmic breathing of animals, the crackle of straw shifting under a hoof, the occasional delighted squeal from a pig dreaming of turnips, it all wove together into a strange, comforting lullaby. The peasant, wrapped in a rough woolen blanket, snuggled against the warm flank of a pig, might have felt in that moment a kind of peace. Sure, he had to muck out the house tomorrow. Sure, the chicken had pecked him in the face again. But for now, he was warm. And in the brutal, freezing months of a medieval winter, that counted for everything. The winter pantry, root cellars, salted fish, and bare shelves. The wind scratches at the door again. You press your hand to the cold wooden latch, but it's not the air outside that you dread. It's the emptiness within. Winter in the medieval world doesn't announce itself with blizzards and sleigh rides. It arrives slowly, like a shadow stretching across the floor, long and patient. It starts with the last apple falling from the tree. Then the garden browns and withers. The last sheaf of grain is threshed. And then, as the days shorten and your breath becomes visible indoors, you begin to hear it, that quiet gnawing hum in the back of your mind. Hunger. The pantry, if you can call it that, is a crude stone-lined root cellar dug into the side of your cottage or carved into the earth beneath it. It's dark and damp. The air is thick with the scent of soil, mold, and something slowly decaying. It's not a room of abundance. It's a tomb for summer's memory. Wooden crates and clay crocks hold what little is left. A few shriveled turnips, a bundle of dried herbs, now flavorless stalks, a stack of rye loaves turned rock-hard weeks ago. You run your hand across them anyway, hoping they'll feel softer today. They don't. There's salted fish in a barrel, tightly packed and pungent. Caught months ago, cured in thick layers of salt to delay rot. You pull back the lid, and the smell punches the air, a mixture of ocean and old sweat. You'll soak it in water for hours to make it edible, or at least chewable. There's also a few dried peas left in a cloth sack. They rattle like stones. You count them even though you know the number won't change. This is the medieval winter menu. A cold stew of root vegetables, a crust of bread if you ration right, and salt-preserved meat so tough your jaw aches after each bite. Meals are quiet affairs, stripped of joy, reduced to need. A ladle of thin broth, a scoop of barley mash, and always that gnawing feeling just beneath the ribs, that more would be better, that less would be disaster. Gone are the greens. Gone are the orchard fruits, the fresh milk, the eggs. The hens have stopped laying, the cow is dry. The goats, scrawny and half asleep, stare blankly from their corner of the house, their breath rising in small clouds. If there's a pig still alive, it's not for eating, it's for surviving. You might have slaughtered one back in November, on St. Martin's Day, if you were lucky. That meat hangs in the rafters now, smoked or salted, wrapped in cloth and prayer. But you've already dipped into it once or twice. You're trying not to do it again unless you absolutely must. The root cellar is more than a pantry. It's a measure of your foresight, your fortune, your failures. Did the harvest go well? Did the rains come on time? Did rats find the stores before you could stop them? You replay these questions in your mind as you light a stub of tallow candle and peer into the gloom. A soft sound, a rustle. You freeze. It's not the rats again, is it? You move slowly, just wind. Or maybe you're too tired to care. Food is rationed not by appetite, but by season. You've counted the weeks to Candlemas and then to Lent. Still weeks of winter left. Still too long. You try to sleep after your meager meal, but the hunger keeps you half wakeful, dreaming of warm gardens and stolen berries. You chew stale bread slowly at dusk, not to savor it, but to make it last. Some villages share stores, communal ovens and pits lined with straw where root crops are buried and insulated against frost. But even shared, there's never enough. Theft is quiet and common. A few extra beans taken from the pot, a heel of bread missing from the corner shelf. Everyone knows, but no one speaks. Hunger makes men silent. Monasteries sometimes offer alms, a crust, a spoonful of porridge, but even they guard their granaries in winter. Charity is thinnest when snow is thickest. Nobles in their manors dine better, game from hunts, wine from cellars, spices shipped in from foreign ports. But their fires are large and their bellies well fed. You do not live in a manor. You live near the edge in a room where frost grows on the inside of the walls. The hunger is not always starvation, not yet, but its presence, constant. A tension in your body, a pressure behind the eyes. The body cools faster when it's hungry. You wrap another woolen layer around your shoulders, but it doesn't help. Sleep is harder now. The wind outside is loud, but your stomach louder. There are stories in the village, always told quietly, of those who didn't make it. The child who slipped away in her sleep, the widow who never woke, the family that left for the city, hoping for better, and were never heard from again. The dead are not buried until the ground thaws. They are kept in the church crypt, or in the coldest corners of the earth where even decay is paused. Sometimes you dream of food, absurd things, ripe pears, roasted meats dripping with fat, honeycomb, a goose stuffed with herbs. You wake up chewing air, ashamed and aching. But you tell no one, everyone dreams. By February, the cellar is nearly empty. You eat less now, not just from shortage, but from caution. You might need to stretch what remains for another month, maybe two. You've already thinned the porridge with extra water. You've boiled the bones 3 times. Still they give off a ghost of flavor. Sometimes you chew bark, alder or birch if it's soft enough, not for nourishment, but to quiet the mouth. You sip warm water and call it broth. You tell your children that tomorrow there will be more, that the snow will melt soon, that Lent is coming and then Easter, and with it, new shoots, green leaves, and life again. You tell them, but you don't believe it yet. In this life, hunger is a rhythm. It tightens like a belt, then loosens in summer, then tightens again. You survive not with comfort, but with habit. You forget what full feels like. You learn instead to feel something else. Gratitude for half a turnip, for a handful of peas, for the silence of an undisturbed root cellar. And then one night, late winter, you find an onion in the dark corner of the cellar. Soft, yes, a little sprouted, but edible. You hold it in your hand like treasure, like light. For tonight, it's flavor. It's weight in the stomach. It's something more than broth. This is winter in the peasant world. This is survival. Bare shelves, salted fish, and the slow counting of days. No feasts, no cheer. Just the quiet, grinding work of staying alive until green returns to the trees and something, anything, grows again. And so you sleep, lightly, thin and quiet, waiting for the thaw. The long darkness, nights that last forever. There is a moment in every medieval winter when you forget what the sun looks like. Not the concept of sunlight, not its warmth or brightness. You remember those. But its shape, the way it hung in the sky, the way it painted shadows across your cottage floor, the way it cast gold on the frost. These things fade like smoke in your mind. All that remains is shadow. The nights are long, not in the way you know long now, not just the hours marked on a clock, but long like a season, like an ocean of black that rolls in just after supper and doesn't recede until the thin, pale gray of morning. In December and January, the darkness comes before you've cleared the bowl, before you've scraped the spoon. It presses against the windows, thick and quiet, as though the world itself has been put away, folded into a cupboard somewhere. You live by embers now, A few faint glows beneath the ashes of yesterday's fire. They are coaxed gently into flame, not to warm the room. It never truly warms, but to keep the edges of cold at bay. The fire does not crackle joyfully. It breathes like an old man, low and rasping. A single log lasts the evening if you're careful. You sit near it, and even so, the chill licks at your spine. The walls don't keep the wind out, they never did. There are candles sometimes, if you've made them. Tallow, poured in the fall, a product of slaughter and patience. They sputter, they smell of smoke and fat, they cast shadows longer than the things that make them. You use them sparingly. Each flame is precious. You might not have more. So mostly, you live in the dark, and it is quiet here. Not silent, never truly silent, but still. The kind of quiet that settles in the bones. The chickens cluck in their sleep. A pig snorts once from its corner. Somewhere above, a mouse rustles straw. But no human sound, no laughter, no talk, no songs, only breath and the creak of the rafters. You could speak, but why? There is nothing new to say, not tonight. Sometimes someone tells a story. A child asks for one, and so a tale unfolds, slow and low. A fox that talks, a saint who tricks the devil, a lost king who returns with the spring. The words are old, older than you, older than this house. They are passed from lip to ear to lip again, polished smooth by time. And when the story ends, it drifts up into the rafters and disappears. The bed is straw stuffed in a sack, or just loose on the floor. You pull a woolen blanket over your head and curl inward. It smells of smoke, of sheep, of long nights already past. Someone breathes beside you, a child or a spouse or a sister. Someone else's body, close enough to steal a little heat from. If you're lucky, there's more than one. You sleep twice a night. The first sleep comes early as the birds would go to roost if they still sang in winter. Deep and heavy. Then you wake, hours later. The second sleep waits. In the long pause between the two, you lie awake in the dark. Not restless, just present. You think, you pray, you wait. You might add a log to the fire, you might not. This waking hour is private, timeless. The house is black, you don't light a flame. Your thoughts drift. Maybe you remember the summer. Maybe you think of the future, of planting, of thawing ground, of light again. Or maybe you feel nothing at all, just a kind of stillness that has no modern name. A medieval sort of peace. Outside, the moon moves slowly behind a cloud. The frost thickens on the eaves. An owl hoots once, far off. The trees do not stir. Nothing does. Not now. The darkness is more than an absence. It's a season. It changes how you see, how you feel, how you live. You learn its shape. You come to know the texture of your cottage by touch alone. You know where the fire is by the warmth on your face. You know who stirs by the sound of breathing. You live without light the way fish live without air, because there is no other choice. The church bell rings eventually, distant, hollow, matins or lauds, one of the night prayers. The monks rise in the dark too, shuffling through cloisters with candles bobbing like fireflies. You are not a monk, but you hear the bell and it tells you the world is still turning. Dawn will come, eventually, and then one day it happens. You rise and step outside, and there is color, a pink smear on the horizon. The sun, low and pale, but there. And for a moment the darkness draws back, just slightly. The cold is still deep, your pantry still bare, but the light touches the earth again. Until then you wait, wrapped in wool and quiet, eyes open to nothing, ears full of silence. The long darkness is not cruel, it simply is. It waits and you wait with it. Sleep now, the second sleep is coming. Let the fire fade, let the cold come, let the shadows keep their watch. You are not alone. This night has held generations before you. It will hold you too. Cold mornings, waking up to ice indoors. There's no sunrise in a medieval winter morning. Not at first. Only a soft bruising of the sky, blue turning to gray, gray to something not quite light. You wake because the cold demands it, not because you've slept enough. The frost creaks beneath your body. Not outside, inside, on the walls, on the floor, on the edge of the blanket wrapped around your shoulders like a burial shroud. Your breath emerges before you like a ghost. Each exhale is a fog, proof of life in a house that feels long abandoned by warmth. You shift beneath the covers, but they do not move with you. The wool has stiffened overnight, rimed at the edges where moisture from your body has frozen. It crackles. Your skin peels from the fabric with a sound. The blanket has become a sheet of ice-laced bark, too brittle to be called soft. The first movement is the hardest. Your body, numb and curled, has learned to conserve, to be still, to give up heat only in slow increments. But now it must unfold. Ankles, knees, elbows, each joint groans like the rafters above. You reach for your tunic. It's cold too, colder than your skin. It feels like it was soaked and left out in a winter field. You pull it on anyway, teeth clenched, muscles flinching. The air in the cottage bites. Not metaphorically, it stings, sharp and dry. A cruel clarity fills your lungs with your first deep breath. You cough. It burns. Your throat cracks, your nose weeps. You press your palm to the wall, out of habit. The stone is wet with a sheen of frozen condensation. In the night, your body's warmth met the bitter air, and the result now glitters faintly. Ice forming like a lace of silver veins across the inner walls of your home. A beauty so stark it feels wrong. If there was a fire last night, it's long since gone to sleep. Only gray ash remains. The hearth looks sullen, indifferent. You stir it with a stick, fingers barely working. A faint orange glow answers. A coal still alive. You coax it gently, blowing, feeding, hoping. If it dies, you'll start from scratch. That means flint, tinder, breath. A small ritual that may or may not reward your effort. Every spark is a small gamble. Water is frozen in its bucket, solid. You chip at it with a knife. A shard breaks loose, clatters against the side. You pick it up and suck it. Not to drink, but to wet your tongue. You'll melt more later for the animals, for the stew, for whatever purpose the day might invent. The chickens are quiet in their coop if they survive the night. You haven't checked yet. Outside, the world is white and gray and terribly still. But you can feel it through the wood. The weight of snow on the roof, the hush of a morning wrapped in ice. If something moved out there, it moved hours ago, when even the moon had gone to rest. Your children stir beside you if you have them, or your spouse, whoever shares the bed. Their faces are pale with the cold, noses red, eyelids reluctant to open. You place your body between them in the morning air for a moment, shielding them just a little longer. Then you rise. You must. The pig in the corner shifts. It's half asleep, half frozen, alive by sheer inertia. A curl of straw steams where it breathes. You nod to it as you pass. Its warmth helped you make it through the night. You know this. You don't say thank you, but you think it. The day begins not with sunrise, but with action. You light the fire if you can. You cut wood if there's any left. You fetch water if it hasn't iced all the way through. You begin with pain. Your fingers ache, your toes are numb, your breath stings, and you move anyway. Because stillness in this cold is surrender. There is awe in it sometimes. In the gleam of rime on the inside of your own roof. In the way your breath fogs and catches the first rays of a reluctant sun. In the way ice forms patterns on the table, delicate as any cathedral carving. But awe doesn't fill the belly. Awe doesn't make warmth. So you work. And somehow, as the morning unfolds, the pain dulls. The cold becomes less an enemy and more a condition. Something to live with. Something to fold into your limbs and carry like a bundle of wood. The fire catches. The smell of smoke rises. The first sound of water boiling breaks the silence. The day has begun. It will be hard, of course. The cold won't leave, only soften. But in surviving the morning, you've already done something great. You've beaten back the worst of it for one more day. The frost will retreat from the walls. The blankets will soften. The sun will rise higher. You breathe again. It still burns, but now it's the burn of motion, of life returning to flesh. You pull your cloak tight, step into the light leaking through the shutter. You open the door. The world greets you, white, sharp, and still. The smell of winter, smoke, sweat, and straw. Winter arrives like an unwelcome guest, and with it comes a scent so distinct and potent it settles into every corner of your life. It is the smell of survival, of toil, of the raw edge between warmth and freeze. You breathe it constantly, unconsciously, and it becomes your world for months. As dawn breaks on a frost-bound day, you inhale first the acrid tang of burnt wood, pine or oak, whichever you could scrounge. It curls into your nostrils, clamps them closed for an instant, and lingers, as though you can't escape its insistence. That is the scent of your hearth, your lifeline, the promise that the cold can be held at bay, at least for a time. Beyond the hearth, another aroma takes hold, the sour, pungent perfume of boiled cabbage. Pot after pot simmers on the embers, cabbage leaves thick and pungent, puddled in water so thin it's almost broth. You eat it over and over because it is cheap, fills the stomach, and grows tender with cooking. The smell seeps into your wooden bowl, your spoon, your fingers. It clings to the cloth neck flap of your tunic. It clings to the rough wool of your layers. Days later, that cabbage smell might still rise from you as you move, a quiet testament to your jeans and lamps and daily sacrifice. Rising heat from the cooking fire carries with it a musty note, wet wool and sweat mixed, a smell of bodies breathing warmth in close quarters. Houses filled with livestock seal that scent into the walls. The barnyard stench, even when pound by straw and distance kept it faint, becomes an undercurrent. There's the weighty whisper of animal breath, pigs and goats, and the occasional chicken stalled out by winter's chill. You might wake to stray flecks of wet straw at your feet, flecks that smell of barn of animals concentrated and sharp. They twist themselves into your hair. They cling to the rounded collar of your cloak. They collect in the hems of your cloak and in the seams of your leather boots that have done nothing but squelch through frozen mud. In the barn this morning is a spongy, damp smell that lies thick in the air, the musk of hoofprint, the fume of defrosting earth clinging to the underside of walls. Your feet carry it home. There it melds with the lingering odor of stove smoke and cabbage, fermenting into something unique, something almost strange in its logic. The odor of waking, of work beginning under perpetual gray sky. Sweat begins. Even in the cold, your body warms as you chop wood, toss hay, stoke the fire. Sweat collects at the small of your back, along the crease of your brow, pooling in your hands from labor. And it carries the scent of effort. Salt, starch from barley grinding in your sweat-slick shirt, wood dust under your nose and in your hair. That scent seeps into your skin, stays with you as you lean over pots, toweling your face with a strip of cloth. There is something fierce in it, something elemental, human bodies against ice, each breath an effort, each movement a chore, a triumph. In the midday half-light, another smell drifts in. It is gritty, mineral, more subtle, cold clay walls warmed by embers releasing a damp, earthy aroma. Dampness rides into the room, wet from melting snow packed around the hut's base. That moisture coils itself through floorboards and cracks at your feet, bringing its own silent song, water that only inches but stays. It reminds you that spring is a promise others make, but this winter isn't ending soon. And yet, there is sweetness too, fleeting. The scent of honey in a cracked wooden dipper, reserved saved for sour porridge on the worst days. You don't take it often, but smelling the honey always brings hope closer than the smoke or rot. It is a promise that gardens will return, that laughter might again slip from warm lips, that there is something beyond this season of ice. Every garment in your house, linen shifts, woolen socks, rough cloaks, and leather caps, accumulates this medley of odor. You put wool next to leather in the overhanging beams, hoping the freeze has stripped bacteria, but the scents just freeze in, intensify. A cloak untouched since December might smell of damp wood, yet untouched by flame as though it dreams of thaw. A pair of woolen socks from Advent smell like hands rubbed on the hearth, like barley kernels you fingered in the store's sack. You learn to wear them nonetheless, learning that comfort and disgust walk hand in winter. You would bathe, of course you would, if the spring stream hadn't stopped flowing, if the river hadn't frozen at the crossing, if the village didn't demand hours of toil and line at the well before night falls. So you don't. You sit in that scent, circling it, steeping in it, because it is your world, because you are busy in it, alive in it, moving purposefully through its brown haze. You aren't unpleasant. You're something else, alive in hardship, brimmed with purpose, practical in your odors and smells and sweat-soaked layers. Sometimes, though, when dusk slants low across packed snow, you pause and breathe. You take in that entire warm, damp, smoky, pig musk, sweat-sour wood stew of scent, and you understand. These odors are your daily markers in a world stripped nearly clean of luxuries. When you smell of boiled cabbage, you know you ate today. When your cloak smells of smoke, you know your hearth is alive. When your boots smell of barn, you know the animals are fed. The smells are your ledger, your fingerprints in this season of barrenness. And so they cling, unapologetic. No dreams of soap or bath or spring water can uproot them right now. They are part of life, solid as the stone hearth and as necessary as the fire you coax to life each morning. They fill your house, your clothing, your very blood. Every day you inhale them, carry them, wear them. When the thaw comes and your tunic finally smells of grass again, you will treasure that scent the way you treasured honey. But until then, you inhale worth and survival and home, all mixed together in the thick winter air. You fall asleep at night in that odor, lying in your straw mattress as the fire dies and embers smoke the room with dim flicker. You breathe deep and drift away under a quilt that holds centuries of this scent in its fibers. The last thing your nose remembers is the burn of smoke and the sweat of days' work, and the soft sting of straw pressing into your shoulder, bedfellows in a time of ice, before the cold claims you again. And perhaps tomorrow, or 1 week later, 1 month later, the smells will shift again, softer, greener. But for now, they are your companions, visceral, unfiltered, alive, anchoring you in a winter-built world of survival, of scent, of life rich and raw in every breath. A family in silence, whispered nights and slow conversations. When the cold tightens its grip and night comes far too soon, a medieval peasant family draws in, not just into their cottage, but into themselves. There's no great drama to it, no ceremony, no grand announcement that the day has ended. It just fades, like color drained from a landscape, and soon the only movement in the room is the fire's dim flicker across rough timber walls. In that hush, everything slows. The scramble of daytime tasks gives way to a kind of shared stillness. They sit close, sometimes shoulder to shoulder, the kind of closeness that isn't about affection so much as necessity. Warmth is a resource, and each body is a coal to be pressed against. The fire speaks louder than they do. It pops and shifts and releases occasional sighs into the air, and the family listens. The father might press a hand to his knees, elbows resting there. The mother might knit or mend, fingers moving without thought, eyes soft with the knowledge that the day's work is done, whether finished or not. Children fidget at first. A toe kicks gently into straw. A small cough escapes. But soon even they learn the rhythm of winter nights. There's nothing to chase, no candle to waste oil on, no errand to run. Darkness has settled, and they settle with it. Voices come in low tones, not whispers, not exactly, but hushed, softened, like sound itself has been muffled by the snow piled against the walls. They talk about small things. Who found the last carrot? Who saw hoof prints by the fence? A story half remembered from the mother's youth. A joke retold by the father, one worn smooth by years and still good for a tired smile. Conversation doesn't flow. It drips like melting icicles. Between each sentence there is space. Not silence that feels awkward, but silence that feels natural, inevitable. Outside, the world is held in frost. Inside, the family wraps in one another's presence. There are no books to read, no clocks to track the hour. Time becomes soft, stretching thin between supper and sleep. Sometimes someone hums, a child usually, or someone scratches a tune on a crude whistle. The music is quiet, more breath than sound, and it fills the room like the smell of smoke. It's not for performance, not even for joy. It's just to be together, to stay human in the long hours between nightfall and rest. And sometimes there are no words at all. A girl leans against her mother's hip, her eyes nearly closed. A boy lays with his feet toward the fire, hands tucked behind his head, watching the ceiling. The father stares into the flames. The mother rubs her thumb over a bit of frayed fabric. They exist like that, suspended, not waiting, not moving forward, just being. It is the stillest kind of family life, the kind that doesn't demand anything from anyone, just warmth and patience and the shared understanding that spring will come when it comes, and not a moment sooner. This silence is not lonely. It's woven with memory. The walls have heard 1,000 such evenings. The room holds the scent of years, wood smoke, wool, wet straw, and those smells bind the present to the past. The children don't know the stories of every quiet winter night their parents sat just like this, but they're part of that line now. They belong to the silence just as much as the walls do. The wind outside tests the shutters. A long, drawn-out moan slips through the gaps in the wood, and the fire answers with a crack. The youngest child stirs, startled. A parent's hand, gentle, wordless, soothes her. No need to explain. No need to reassure with phrases. Just a hand on the back, firm and familiar. That's enough. They eat quietly when they eat. A piece of bread passed from one hand to another. A spoonful of porridge thickened from the last of the barley. No feasts. just enough to keep the cold from hollowing out their stomachs completely. Hunger is a presence in the room, though never spoken of directly. They know it's there, just as they know the draft that seeps through the doorframe or the mouse that rustles behind the wattle wall. Winter is a collection of burdens born together, and silence is how they carry it. When they speak more freely, if they speak more freely, it's often near bedtime. In that last moment before the fire's glow fades entirely, stories bloom. Not always, but sometimes. A tale of a knight who found warmth in a cave guarded by a talking fox. A tale of a clever girl who bartered a single chicken feather into a silver coin. A tale the children have heard before, but one that tastes different in the dark. These stories float in the dim air like warm breath, touching every face in the room. They are a kind of resistance, a spark of wonder against the weight of ice. The family sleeps close like spoons under thick layers of wool and old animal hides. Some nights, no one says good night. They just shift slowly into sleep, one by one. The fire dies, the room cools, the silence deepens, breathing becomes the loudest sound, slow, even, human. This too is how warmth survives, not just through flame, but through presence, through breath on the same air, through stillness shared, through the wordless reassurance that no one is alone in the cold. And so they make it to morning, not by conquering winter, but by waiting with it, beside each other. A family in silence, peasant dreams, nightmares and fantasies of a better life. When sleep comes, it doesn't announce itself. It slides in softly like mist and takes hold of a tired body without warning. For the medieval peasant, whose days are packed with physical labor and whose nights are stripped of distraction, sleep is one of the few sure things. It comes early, and it comes hard. There's no mattress, no feather bed, just straw and hides, and perhaps a bit of cloth. But the body accepts what it's given. Exhaustion dulls discomfort. The mind begins to drift, even before the last flicker of firelight is gone. And with that sleep, dreams. Strange, slippery things that bloom in the cold. Some nights they are so vivid they feel like prophecy. Other times they are muddled fragments, images without shape, feelings without names. In the deep chill of winter, dreams become more than just subconscious wanderings. They become a kind of refuge, an escape hatch from the endless gray of frozen days and the aching hunger of thin meals. A man dreams of a feast, not just bread but meat, roasted goose, dripping fat, crackling skin, cheese so soft it melts on the tongue, sweet cakes, almonds, bowls of honey. The smells, too, so rich and full that his sleeping mouth waters. In his dream, he eats without end. No one stops him. No one measures his share. And in the morning, the pain in his belly is sharper than before, but his heart, strangely, feels fuller for a moment. A girl dreams of summer. She doesn't remember all the real ones, too young, too many of them blurred. But in her sleep, summer is gold and green and laughter. The air is warm on her skin. Her bare feet press into soft grass. She runs fast and light, and when she stops, a sunbeam falls directly onto her shoulder. She wakes to the sting of cold on her nose, but for a breath or two, she still feels that sun, like a memory she never actually lived. Some dream of God, of angels with bright wings and eyes like stars, of choirs singing in languages they don't know but understand anyway. These dreams leave them quiet come morning. Not frightened, not joyful, just still as if touched by something beyond frost and earth and toil. These dreams linger, like candle smoke. They return in flashes during the day, when the snow falls gently, or when the church bell rings from far off, muffled by the wind. And then there are the darker dreams, the ones born from hunger, fear, and the ache of cold bones. Dreams of the wolf at the door, dreams of ice cracking beneath their feet, of loved ones lost in snow, of empty fields, barren tables, firewood turned to ash before the sun has even risen. These dreams are not always fantastical. Sometimes they are simple scenes of ordinary dread. A child's cough that won't stop, a neighbor's silence after the storm, a knock at the door in the middle of the night. Even in dreams, winter's hand is heavy, but hope sneaks in too. It takes strange shapes. A peasant boy dreams of flying, not like a bird, not with wings, but floating above the village, above the fields, where the snow looks like soft wool and the smoke from chimneys rises like ribbons. He sees his home from above and thinks in the dream how small and peaceful everything looks, how simple. He wakes up and can't explain why the dream makes him feel better. It just does. In some dreams, they're not peasants at all. They're lords, kings, saints. They wear clothes without patches, and they speak words that people listen to. They don't have to beg or bend. They sit and others serve. These dreams can be dangerous, too bright, too sweet. They can turn to bitterness in the light of day. But even so, they return. A taste of what could be, or what never will be, depending on how you look at it. There is no way to control what dreams come. No herbal tea or feather pillow to guide the night. Sleep is raw, unshaped, unguarded. The cold presses in, yes, but so does the mind's need to make sense of the world, or to flee from it. And in that half-light of sleep, the line between memory and fantasy softens. A grandfather long dead visits by the hearth. A lamb lost in the spring is found again. The roof does not leak. The belly does not groan. It's not always peaceful. Dreams are sometimes frantic, full of running and stumbling and searching. But even these offer something real. The chance to move, to act, to do what waking hours may never allow. A mother who feels powerless to feed her children might dream of finding a hidden cellar, stacked high with grain. A man who's lost 3 toes to frostbite might dream of walking a long road in summer, his feet strong and whole. And when the dreams fade and the room returns, the cold air, the straw, the cramped walls, it's hard to say whether the dreams have helped or hurt. Some wake feeling hollow, as if the night had promised something it could not keep. Others wake with a spark, a story to tell, or a feeling they can't name, only know. There are no dream diaries, no analysis. Dreams pass between family members in quiet morning conversations, or not at all. A child might whisper to her sister, "I saw a bird that spoke like father." A man might grunt and say, "Strange dream last night," then never explain. But everyone dreams, even the old ones, even the sick, even those who say they don't. In the end, dreams are another kind of warmth, not enough to chase away the cold, but enough to soften it, enough to give the mind something to chew on while the body rests. A better life imagined, a fear faced in secret, a memory wrapped in sunlight. And though the dreams vanish, they leave something behind, a flicker, a feeling, a reason to get up, to tend the fire again, to step out into the snow and try. Because maybe, just maybe, the world they saw in sleep might one day be found in waking, or maybe not, but still they dreamed, and that counts for something. Midnight hunger, empty stomachs, and sleeping through it. It begins in the quiet long after the last ember has faded and the village has given itself over to the cold, the kind of quiet that settles into the bones. Outside, the wind whispers through bare trees. Inside, only the breath of sleepers rises and falls, slow, soft, uneven. Somewhere under that thatched roof, beneath a pile of coarse wool and straw, a stomach turns over on itself. Not in pain exactly, but in protest. A hollow ache, sharp at the edges, dull in the middle. Hunger never sleeps, not really. It waits, curled and quiet, until the stillness of night makes it louder. Dinner, if it could be called that, was sparse. A crust of rye bread, a ladle of thin cabbage broth, maybe a dried turnip split between 4 mouths. No one was full. No one expected to be. In winter, the pantry is more memory than promise. And so families eat what they have, not what they want. They chew slowly, not because they're savoring it, but because there's so little, and making it last gives the illusion of plenty. And then the dark comes, and they lie down beside one another. Blankets pulled tight, bodies curled for warmth, but the belly stays alert. The muscles stay clenched. It's a different kind of cold when you're hungry. Not the frostbite sort, but a sinking chill that starts behind the ribs and spreads outward. A chill that no fire can reach. A child stirs in the dark and presses a hand to their stomach, too tired to cry, too used to this feeling to name it. No secret stash. The butter ran out weeks ago. The salted pork is long gone, and even the onions are starting to rot. Maybe there are a few peas left in a sack, but they're for tomorrow, or the day after. So the answer is always the same. Close your eyes, ignore the gnawing, and wait for morning. The body adjusts, they say. It learns to run on less. And maybe that's true, but no one gets used to the ache entirely. It's always there, somewhere between the shoulder blades and the spine, reminding them of what's missing. Some whisper to themselves before sleep, little prayers, half-formed hopes, not for comfort or riches, but for something simple. A bowl of stew, a bit of cheese, a full belly, even just once. The older ones know how to ride it out. They've learned that moving too much makes it worse, that staying still conserves warmth and strength. They've learned to breathe slowly, to press their hands beneath their armpits, to press their knees together. They remember worse winters, the kind where people vanished into the woods and didn't return. They've learned that hunger is like the wind. It comes, it stays, and it goes. Children, though, they struggle. Their bodies are growing, and their dreams are still filled with sweet things. They dream of apples, of warm porridge, of butter melting on hot bread. They wake to find none of it real. A mother reaches over and hushes them. Shh, go back to sleep, she murmurs, even if her own stomach is twisting too. She tells a story if she has the strength, about the warm days of spring, about eggs in a basket, about feast days and festivals and smells that make your mouth water. It helps. A little. And then there are those who stay awake. Not out of choice, but because sleep doesn't come easily when the stomach is empty. They listen to the sounds of others shifting in the dark. A cough, a sniffle, the crunch of straw. They think of food, then try not to. They remember meals from better seasons. The full table after harvest, the barley loaves, thick and warm, the meat from a butchered pig, smoked and saved, now only a memory. They think of the future too, though it's hazier, planting again, growing again, baking again, eating until they are full. Some speak to God in the silence, not in desperation, but in quiet solidarity. They ask nothing grand, just the strength to bear it, and maybe, if it pleases him, a dream about a feast to make the night pass quicker. Hunger does strange things to faith. It strips it bare, makes it less about miracles and more about mercy, just enough to carry on, just enough to make it to morning. The smell of the room doesn't help. Straw, wool, ash, old stew. It clings to everything. Sometimes it tricks the brain, makes it imagine food where there is none. Someone might wake suddenly, convinced they smell bread, only to realize it's just the fire's last breath mingling with the memory of meals long gone. Still they breathe it in, wishing, wanting, waiting. There's a tenderness in this quiet, a soft surrender. No one complains out loud. Complaining wastes energy. Instead, they huddle closer. Arms drape across each other, hands find hands. Even the livestock, if they're inside, settle nearby, adding body heat and a strange kind of comfort. A pig snorts in its sleep, a chicken shifts under a crate. Everyone is waiting together, and eventually sleep wins. Not because the hunger goes away, but because the body can't stay awake forever. It gives in, worn out. The dreams come. Sometimes vivid, sometimes blank, sometimes strange. A man dreams of biting into a raw turnip, dirt still clinging to it, and wakes with a dull ache in his teeth. A child dreams of milk, warm and frothy, and wakes licking their lips. Morning always comes, slowly, reluctantly. The first sign is the sound of movement, a cough, a creak of wood, someone groaning as they stretch stiff limbs. The air is colder now, somehow. The frost has crept into the walls, but the hunger is familiar, less a surprise than a companion. They rise, they stoke the fire, they chew what little there is. They start again. The nights are long, but they are not forever. One day, the bread will be thicker. One day, the pot will be full. For now, though, there is this. Shared quiet, whispered stories, aching bellies, and the pace of people who have known this cold 1,000 times before. They do not complain. They endure. Hunger, like winter, does not define them. It shapes them. It passes. It returns. It passes again. And through it all, they sleep. Not always peacefully, not always fully, but enough to survive, enough to reach the thaw. When illness comes, cold hands, hot foreheads. Winter is not measured in snow nor in length, but in bodies bending under fevered weight. When illness strikes a medieval peasant household in the cold months, it comes without warning and without mercy. A cough begins as a whisper, a tremor in the chest that worsens with each shivering breath. Then comes heat, an unnatural fire that flares behind the eyes and beside the ribs. A forehead that pulses like a wounded animal's. Cold hands pressed against quilts that do little to warm them. In the frozen night, illness is an enemy more relentless than the wind. Today, the household notices first when the child's laugh stops. She lies huddled, her small body curled against her mother's side. A scratchy cough rattles through her chest like loose stones. The mother presses a cloth, steeped in warm vinegar perhaps, or onion and honey, against her forehead, hoping to coax down the fever or at least comfort her. There is no apothecary within miles. No licorice root, no willow bark, no measure of herb or balm powerful enough to claim certainty. Instead, there are broths, watery stews of barley and rare scraps of vegetables, boiled long and served warm if lukewarm. Every sip is a prayer. Illness in winter spreads quickly. Houses are tight-packed, bodies close for warmth. The same air you breathe is shared. A sniffle becomes a chorus of coughs. A child's clammy hands leave traces of sickness where they touch. Doors remain closed against the cold, but not against infection. The livestock, locked within or nearby, breathe out hot mist that clouds the air. Flickers from the hearth glow on patient faces, drawn and soft. There is no shame in falling sick. You expect it to strike sooner or later. But there is deep fear too. Fear that weakness may be fatal, that fevers will break with delirium, that a battered body may not rise again. There are other households, maybe those of wealthier yeomen or minor gentry, with an earthenware jar of honeyed mead infused with willow bark, or a scrap of dried herb passed down by an aunt who learned words from the monastery. But here, such remedies are stories more than tools. Instead, the family treasures what they have. A lump of ginger traded at the market in autumn, wrapped in cloth now. A handful of puree from cooked apple skins. A teaspoon of honey if even that remains. The ingredients do little more than ease the throat or deliver kindness. But kindness is a medicine in winter. Nights become the hardest time. The simplest cough becomes sharp and jagged in the dark. A mother wraps her arms around the fevered child, shielding a flicker of emberlight with her body, holding both warmth and concern. The fire grows low as winter burns through fuel faster with more mouths needing heat. Coals fade, the room dims. Lanterns give off meek, yellow pools of light. Candles sputter and wax melts in orange beads. Time collapses into those long hours of watching, one breath then another, measuring them in sighs and the faint rise and fall of chest. Fevers rise and fall in waves. Hot flushes leave the body damp, then cold sweats follow, their moisture freezing on blankets and leaving salt stains on pillows. Limbs go limp, the pulse rattles under fingertips. At times they say prayers, not grand ones, but simple, direct ones. May Christ grant sleep this night and strength for dawn. A whisper offered to the dark roof beams, the oldest witnesses in the world. When the fever peaks, delirium may follow. The sick child might talk to ghosts, to saints long gone, to animals unseen. Grandmother, she murmurs in slurred tones, the cow calls me. The mother stays silent, soothed by the sound of a voice, however far from sense it travels. She strokes her child's hair, damp with sweat, and thinks, even this is a mercy, because it means life still flickers in her veins. If the fever breaks, it happens suddenly, an untethered clarity that arrives like thaw in spring. Skin cools, eyes focus, the cough may remain, rattling in residual weakness. But the worst passes, and the family exhales. They smile through exhaustion. The fire glows stronger. Someone fetches more broth. Tea from lemon balm is offered, or mint if they're lucky. Every meal is now a gratitude, every breath more than survival, it is recovery. But not every fever breaks. In one house nearby, a father succumbs over a night, and before dawn the body has gone cold, the vibrant warmth extinguished. They wrap him carefully, linen atop straw, wool over that, then bury him in the family plot beneath frozen soil, delayed until the ground allows. The grief is quiet like a footstep in snow. And after the body is gone, the house feels emptier in a way that cold cannot explain. Still, life continues. The alewife, a neighbor who brews spiced ale, brings a jug of herbal mead towards a recovery. It's offered like a token of community care. It tastes of mint, of cloves, of grain. It is medicine, comfort, and fellowship in one. The children drink a spoonful. The mother allows herself a sip. The sick sibling holds it as though it were a priceless coin. Healing is not just in the broth. It is in that smell, that touch, that gesture of another household sharing warmth across the cold. After recovery, bodies remain fragile. A cough may linger through days, turning into a wheeze with every breath. The weakened lungs struggle in the cold air. Children are kept close, near the fire, swaddled in extra layers. Everything slows, chores, work, movement. The household acknowledges vulnerability. They treat it as part of their winter rhythm, a reminder of how fine the line is between life and death. Medicine remains beneath their fingertips only through tactile care, cleaning the bedding, changing wet garments, holding damp hands. There is no heat lamp, no analgesic, no disinfected spring water. There is touch, presence, attention. Tender meals offered even if they eat none. Broth sipped slowly, porridge warmed in palms. The family leans into small routines, lighting a wick over the cot, brushing stray straw from hair, pulling blankets higher each night. They mark recovery quietly. Each day without fever is a victory. A cough that quiets is cause for relief. A smile, weak but real, is cause for hope renewed. In time, the person stands again, shivering in frosted morning air, eyes brighter, breath slower. They step outside, breathe deeply of the cold that once felt like punishment and now feels like challenge beaten. The household lets out collective breath and for a moment believe they will survive this season too. And yet winter continues to hold them in its grip. They remain tired, cautious. They watch neighbors, closer now than before, aware that illness can outrun even the strongest. They share stories of survival, of broths that renewed, of prayers delivered in the darkest hours. They speak the names of saints who appeared in fevered dreams. They promise who will tend next. This is the tender, realistic history of winter illness. It is a story of human fragility met with human care. No miracles, no grand cures, just presence beside the sick, just warming broth and cloaks, just old hands brushing hair from fevered foreheads. Illness comes in winter, they say, but it also can lift. A frail life returns to shiver beside the hearth once more, and every breath after illness in a cold season tastes all the sweeter. In the end, it is this: cold hands that warmed again beside hot foreheads, a family's vigil, the slow turning of life back toward health. It is the medicine of being present, the cure of togetherness, keeping children warm, blankets, stories, and shared breath. In the coldest nights of the month, keeping children warm was a sacred task, woven from layers of love, tradition, and sheer necessity. In medieval peasant homes, where stone and wood offered little against the relentless chill, warmth came not from luxury, but from closeness. Bodies pressed together in a tight, living quilt, children nestled in nests crafted from straw and wool, the very fibers smelling of earth and hearth fire, a cocoon stitched by hands that knew both hardship and tenderness. A child's bed was rarely just a bed. It was a carefully arranged sanctuary. Straw, freshly swept and sometimes even replaced if the household was lucky, provided the first layer, soft and insulating. On top of this came coarse woolen blankets, heavy and scratchy but invaluable. These blankets carried the scent of sheep and smoke, of hands that mended them through years of wear. Their weight pressed down, warding off the cold fingers of winter creeping through cracks in the walls. Mothers knew the value of shared warmth better than anyone. When dusk slipped over the village and the heart's last glow dimmed, a mother would cradle her child close, feeling the rapid flutter of a small heart beneath layers of linen and wool. Her breath rose and fell in soft rhythm, a gentle pulse against the child's cheek. She whispered lullabies, melodies passed down through generations, words chosen not for their meaning, but for their calming cadence. Each note was a shield against the dark and the cold. Fathers, often worn from the day's labors, played their quiet part. Before night fully settled, they would tend the fire, coaxing the last glowing embers to life. The heat was fragile, a flicker easily lost, but it was the heartbeat of the home, a pulse of warmth that fed the fragile lives within. Once the fire was settled, the father's hands would smooth a child's hair, steady and sure, offering silent reassurance in the stillness. Sometimes a soft word or a whispered story of the day's happenings was shared, turning the quiet house into a place of gentle connection. The warmth children received was more than physical. It was a language of presence. In an age without central heating, hot water bottles, or electric blankets, bodies themselves became the primary source of comfort. A mother's lap was a hearth, a father's arms, a fortress. When cold night air pressed against wooden shutters and frost crept near the doorway, the shared breath of the family filled the room with warmth. Even the simple act of exhaling together created an invisible shield against the chill. Stories were as much a part of bedtime as blankets. Tales whispered in low tones filled the darkness with light. Stories of saints and miracles, of forest spirits and brave ancestors, of the changing seasons and the cycles of sowing and harvest. These narratives carried hope and continuity, weaving a thread between the present cold and the promise of spring's return. In the quiet, the child's eyes would grow heavy, lulled by both words and warmth. the boundary between waking and dreaming softening like a snowdrift at dawn. Siblings shared beds when space was scarce. They pressed close, a small wreathing mass of limbs and wool, their breathing interlocking. Even the youngest, with their tiny bodies curled like fragile birds, contributed to the collective warmth. The closeness was sometimes noisy, soft snuffles, the shuffle of restless feet, whispered giggles, but it was always reassuring. In that shared body heat, cold lost much of its bite. Peasant homes were small and often damp, but the tight spaces became a refuge. Narrow beds tucked into corners, packed with straw mattresses and layered blankets, were warmed by the bodies within. Sometimes livestock nestled nearby, their own heat radiating through floorboards or rough wooden stalls just beyond the wall. A pig, a goat, or even a chicken offered more than companionship. They were living heaters, their warmth soaking into the wood and stone, inching toward the bedrooms where children slept. The coldest nights were also the darkest, the sky outside a heavy blanket of black pierced only by distant stars or a pale moon. But inside, the house breathed with life. The flickering candlelight danced on walls, shadows twisting in a slow, quiet ballet. Mothers rocked, fathers hummed, and children sighed into sleep. In those moments, the biting cold was held at bay by the simplest of miracles. The human body, held close, offering its warmth without question or reserve. When frost formed on window panes and the hearth's crackle was a rare gift, these acts of care became a ritual of survival. Mothers tucked children tightly, making sure no drafts slipped through worn blankets. Fathers kept vigil at the fire, ensuring it did not falter. The family breathed together, whispered together, waited together, each breath, each heartbeat a promise that the cold would not claim their youngest. To be a child in medieval winter was to live at the intersection of vulnerability and protection. The chill outside was sharp and unyielding, but inside, warmth was a living thing, passed hand to hand, body to body. It was in the soft murmur of a lullaby, the worn roughness of a wool blanket, the slow, steady pulse of a mother's breath. This was how medieval peasants kept their children warm on the coldest nights of the month, not with riches or grand inventions, but with the timeless power of closeness and care. The blankets might be thin, the walls drafty, and the nights long, but in those shared moments, nestled tight against the cold, children slept safe, wrapped in a nest of straw, stories, and shared breath. Borrowed time when firewood runs out. The night closes in, cold and unrelenting, and the hearth's flame flickers low. The pile of firewood once stacked with care by the door is now nothing but scattered ashes and empty hopes. There is no more wood, no kindling, no dry twigs, no scraps to coax even a stubborn ember back to life. The fire, once a roaring guardian against the dark, is now a mere memory. This is borrowed time. In a peasant's world where the seasons dictated every breath and step, running out of firewood was a quiet disaster, a slow unraveling of the fragile warmth that meant survival. The logs were not just fuel, they were life, comfort, and a thin barrier against the creeping cold that seeped into every corner of the home. Without wood, the night became a test of endurance, a slow dance with the chill that wrapped itself tighter as hours passed. The last sparks sink into the ash, a soft sigh of defeat. No longer is there the crackling comfort, the dancing shadows on stone and timber. Instead, there is a hollow silence, pierced only by the occasional creak of frost tightening on the walls or the whisper of wind outside. It feels as if the cold has a voice now, a patient and steady one, pressing in from every crack and seam. Inside, breath becomes visible, a faint mist floating in the stale air, each exhale a fragile cloud against the freezing stillness. Bodies huddle closer, seeking to share the warmth that fire no longer provides. The space shrinks and the night grows vast. Every movement is measured, every sound sharp in the quiet. The fire's absence is a reminder of scarcity lived daily. Wood was gathered over weeks, branches trimmed from hedges, deadfalls scavenged in the woods, bits of driftwood from the riverbank, scraps from the fields. But winter's hunger for warmth often outpaced supply. When the pile dwindled to nothing, hope dwindled with it. Peasants knew this moment well, when warmth was no longer theirs to command but something to endure. The cold seeped into the bones, slow and invasive. Fingers stiffened, joints ached. The breath came sharper, colder, each inhale a sting. The night stretched on, relentless and unyielding. In this silence, Memories of fire lived vividly. The orange glow of flames, the crackle of burning wood, the dance of light on faces. These images were summoned again and again to stave off the encroaching despair. The hearth was still a center, but now only in thought. The mind carried the fire where the body could no longer feel it. Even the simplest tasks became burdensome. Fetching water from the well meant stepping outside into the frozen dark, the cold biting through threadbare clothes. Cooking was reduced to cold meals, eaten in the shadows with numb fingers. Sleep was a fragile refuge, but even in dreams the chill pressed near. Families tightened their circles, seeking solace in the warmth of shared breath and bodies. Children were pulled close, whispered lullabies softening the sharp edges of cold and hunger. Mothers rubbed hands and feet, offering what little heat they could muster. Fathers kept watch, eyes heavy but alert, guarding against the long night's threats. The cold was not just physical, it was a quiet enemy that tested spirit and will. Yet, in this borrowed time, there was resilience, a stubborn refusal to surrender. Peasants huddled beneath threadbare blankets, finding strength in closeness and memory, carrying the flame in their hearts even as the hearth went dark. This was winter's harshest truth. The fire would fade, but the night must be endured. The cold was an unyielding force, but so too was the human will to survive. One breath, one heartbeat, one borrowed moment of warmth at a time. The role of faith, prayers, saints, and sacred candles. When the cold became unbearable, when even the fire struggled to hold back the dark, medieval peasants turned to something older and deeper than flame: faith. Not faith as doctrine, not faith as studied scripture, but faith as a living thing, a breath in the cold air, a whisper in the silence, a steady thread tying earth to heaven. The hut may have lacked comfort, but it was never truly empty. On a shelf, or tucked in a niche in the wall, stood a wooden carving of the Virgin, or a crude iron cross, or perhaps a painted icon brought back from a distant pilgrimage. These were more than decorations. They were anchors, reminders of a world beyond frost and toil. The sacred mingled with the daily. The boundary between the divine and the mundane was porous. A woman mending a cloak by firelight might murmur the Hail Mary under her breath without thinking. A child, frightened by the howl of wind outside, might clutch a wooden rosary for comfort, the beads worn smooth from generations of fingers. Even the bread, when it was warm and fresh, might be marked with a cross before being broken, less out of ceremony than out of habit, as natural as breathing. On the coldest nights, when the fire guttered low and sleep refused to come, faith filled the silence. The family would gather not just for warmth, but for prayer. It might not be formal. They didn't always have the Latin words or the proper phrases, but they had intention, reverence, a shared hope that the divine was listening. Someone would light the sacred candle, set aside and used only for such nights, often made from better wax or blessed during a holy day, and its soft glow became a kind of warmth in itself. The shadows it cast danced across the icon's face, making it seem for a moment like the Virgin herself watched over them. They prayed for warmth, yes, but more than that. They prayed for endurance, for patience, for mercy, for the neighbor with the sick child, for the animals in the byre, for the field that must thaw in spring, for the strength to make it through another night. These prayers weren't lofty or poetic. They were simple, like the people who spoke them. But in their simplicity was a deep and resonant power. Each prayer was a thread weaving human need to divine possibility. Saints played a special role on these nights. Every peasant household had its favorites, saints whose lives echoed their own, who felt close, almost familiar. Saint Bridget, who tended hearths and farmsteads. Saint Anthony, protector of animals. Saint Nicholas, bringer of small mercies. Stories about them passed from mouth to mouth in low, reverent tones. A girl might whisper that Saint Agnes once warmed a freezing lamb with her breath alone. A boy might believe that Saint Cuthbert kept the cold at bay by standing in the sea and praying until dawn. Whether these tales were true mattered less than what they offered: hope, example, presence. Sometimes the prayers were chanted slowly, in rhythm with the breath. The rhythm helped calm the body, settle the mind. The repetition lulled children toward sleep and helped elders forget the ache in their joints. On nights of particular fear, a storm outside, or rumors of wolves in the woods, the prayers took on a more urgent tone. The voices rose together, soft but fervent, as if volume might reach farther into heaven. Other nights, the prayers were silent, each person speaking inwardly, privately, to the God who saw all and answered in his own time. Faith didn't banish the cold. It didn't fill empty stomachs or lengthen the daylight. But it did something subtler. It gave shape to suffering. It made the hardship feel known, counted, understood. When a child wept from the cold, a parent might whisper, "He hears you." Not to stop the crying, but to offer a reason to endure it. The pain became part of something, part of a divine story where even the poorest were seen. In some homes, the family would mark a circle in ash on the floor while sitting within it during prayer, believing it to be a sacred space where no evil or sickness could enter. In others, they tied tiny straw crosses above the doorframe, invoking protection from spirits and storms. These acts, handed down over generations, mixed Christian ritual with older folk traditions. But to the peasant, there was no conflict. All faith was one faith, as long as it kept the night away. The church itself, distant though it might be, also played a role. The toll of its bell was a sound carried on wind and memory alike. Even when unheard, peasants imagined its presence. They knew the times of its ringing. They pictured the priest lighting candles before the altar. In the hut, someone might say, "Father Thomas is praying for us now," and it would feel true. The connection between home and church was not physical. It was spiritual, imagined, trusted. On the rare nights when someone did venture out to check on a neighbor or to tend to a sick animal, they often carried a small object of faith, a relic if they had one. More often, just a blessed coin or a bit of cloth from a saint's feast day, tucked into the pocket or tied around the wrist, not as superstition, but as assurance, a shield against the unseen forces that prowled the edges of the world. And when someone died during winter, and sometimes they did, the rituals of faith became the only balm. The body would be laid out by the hearth, and the prayers would double. A candle would burn until it could burn no more. The family would whisper the names of saints and plead for safe passage to the next world. Grief, when it came wrapped in ritual, and faith was how they bore it. For those left behind, the knowledge that a soul had gone ahead into warmth and light made the cold a little more bearable. They imagined the departed walking through fields that never froze, toward a gate that never closed. In the long nights that followed, they sometimes spoke to the dead, quietly, believing they listened. Faith did not need to be perfect. It didn't require certainty. Doubts were allowed, questions too. But what mattered most was the act of reaching. Upward, outward, inward. The belief that something greater stood beyond the wind and frost. That no matter how small a fire they could make, there was always a greater light burning elsewhere. So the candle glowed, the prayers rose, the saints listened, and the family, held together by more than just shared blood, found peace, not an escape from the cold, but in a sacred endurance within it. And that in the end was faith's greatest gift. Not warmth, not miracles, not the end of suffering, but the strength to suffer together. Quietly, reverently, with heads bowed and hearts open, as the night deepened and the world held its breath. Footsteps in the snow, going outside when you must. Not every task could wait for morning. Not every need could be ignored. And in the heart of winter, when the world outside the hut was frozen into silence, there were still reasons, small, mundane, inescapable reasons, to open the door and step out into the snow. You didn't want to. No one did. But the chamber pot was full, or a cow had stopped lowing, or the roof was groaning under the weight of fresh fall. These weren't choices, they were necessities. Someone had to go. The cold hits like a slap the moment the door creaks open. It doesn't creep in, it lunges. And the warmth you've been guarding all night, the thin pocket of breath and body heat inside the hut, bleeds instantly into the night air. You hesitate, foot halfway over the threshold, and look into the dark. The snow is falling lightly, soundlessly. There's no wind, but the air bites all the same. It settles in your nose, your lashes, the space between your fingers. You pull your cloak tighter, but it doesn't help much. Cold this deep ignores fabric. Each step outside is deliberate, cautious. The ground isn't just frozen, it's alive with hazards. Ice that catches the heel, snow that hides a broken plank. A misstep can mean a fall, and a fall can mean frostbite or worse. No one talks about it, but everyone knows someone who slipped alone and didn't come back. So you walk slowly, the torch flickering low in your gloved hand, the crunch of snow underfoot loud in the stillness. It's the only sound, save for the occasional sigh of the wind or the creak of a distant tree. The night is not just cold, it's vast. The stars, sharp and white, burn through the darkness like ice chips scattered across the sky. The moon, when it shows, makes the snow glow faintly, casting long shadows that play tricks on the eye. A log looks like a crouching dog, a fence post like a hunched man. You keep your eyes low on the ground in front of you. You try not to imagine anything lurking at the edge of the wood. Maybe you're headed to the animal shelter, a few paces from the hut. The cow has stopped moving, and that's never a good sign. You have to check, just in case she's calved early or has lain down too long on the cold straw. You push the barn door open, and the hinges moan. Inside, the warmth of the beasts is faint, but welcome. Their breath steams in the air, rising like ghosts. The cow blinks at you slowly. She's fine, just sleeping. You exhale, a fog of relief, and refill her hay as a gesture of thanks. Or maybe you're just emptying the pot, a task done quickly, but never carelessly. If the ground is iced over, you might slip. If you drop it, the shame lingers. So you walk it carefully to the edge of the yard, to the latrine pit or the snow-buried ditch, and tip it away from the hut, from the well, from the places where life will return in spring. In that moment, even this grim task feels like stewardship, an effort to keep the living space clean, safe, sacred. Going outside at night is not done lightly. Children aren't allowed. Elders avoid it unless absolutely necessary. It falls, most often, to the able-bodied middle. A father, a daughter, a farmhand, wrapped in too many layers, boots soaked and breath shallow. Every moment outside is a calculation. How long before frost finds your toes? Before your fingers lose feeling? Before your limbs move slow enough to stumble? And always, there's the return. The door you hope is still unbarred. The fire that you pray still smolders. The flicker of light from within, even if faint, is everything. The moment you see it, your chest loosens. You pick up your pace. The snow swirls at your back, but you don't look behind you. Not for wolves, not for ghosts, not for anything. The cold teaches you not to waste time on stories. Just get inside. The door creaks shut again. It seals with a dull thump. Inside, the warmth isn't much, but it's enough. Your limbs sting as they thaw, and someone takes the pot from your hands or the lantern, and you nod. No words are needed. Just that shared look. You went out. You came back. You did what had to be done. There is a kind of quiet bravery in this, going out when you must. Not for glory, not for heroism, but because survival depends on small, unglamorous choices. Because the fire can't reach the barn. Because the snow won't wait. Because life, even in its most basic form, demands effort. Even now, even in the cold. And so the door will open again. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe in an hour. Another pair of footsteps will mark the white. Another soul will step into the hush of snow and stars, hoping, always hoping, they'll return before the cold remembers how to bite. Neighborly warmth, the quiet kindness of the poor. When winter presses in hardest, when the wind finds every crack in the wattle walls and the cold hums in the marrow of your bones, kindness doesn't vanish, it grows quieter, more deliberate. Like the embers of a shared fire, it doesn't blaze, it glows. There's not much to spare in a village where no one has enough, but that doesn't stop anyone from giving. A pot of soup, stretched with more water and fewer roots, makes its way next door when someone hears a cough through thin walls. It's not enough to fill a belly, not really, but it's warm, and that counts. And warmth, when given freely, carries a weight no ledger can measure. A woman who has 2 blankets gives one to the widow down the lane. She doesn't say why. She just folds it neatly, tucks it into a basket with a heel of bread, and sets it by the door. Later, when the wind howls and the thatch flutters, the widow pulls that blanket tighter and breathes a little easier. She'll never ask for help. Pride's as common as cold, but she'll nod more gently when they pass each other next. In better seasons, neighbors exchange labor, mending roofs, tending fields, grinding grain. In winter, there's less to do, but more to endure. And so the exchanges become smaller, softer. A few hot coals carried in a pot across the yard to rekindle a dying fire. A bundle of kindling left outside the door before sunrise. A child's hand, shy and cold, offering a turnip plucked from the last of the cellar stores. No one calls it charity. It's not spoken of with ceremony or thanks. It's just what's done. Because someday it will be your child coughing, your hearth cold, your stew thin, and the neighbor who gave today will be the one in need tomorrow. In the coldest nights of the month, community is not a theory, it is a necessity. You don't survive alone, you survive by belonging. There are no rich here, no saviors in fur-lined cloaks, just people poor and worn, doing what they can with what little they have. And still they share. A ladle passed through a curtain, a cup of milk pressed into a frozen hand, an old man with shaky legs who still walks to the well because the young mother nearby just had her third child and shouldn't be out in the dark. Even the smallest gestures matter. A song hummed outside the wall to calm a frightened child. A visit to a lonely elder. A joke told badly but sincerely, just to warm the air between two people. Sometimes the only thing shared is presence. The quiet companionship of someone sitting with you while the wind bangs the shutters. That too is warmth. No one expects grand gestures. There's no time, no means for them. What matters is the rhythm of these small mercies. The understanding passed down like a recipe that surviving winter means sharing it. Not just the burdens, but the moments of relief. The firelight, the broth, the blanket folded twice instead of once. On nights when the snow falls hard and the moon hides behind thick clouds, the village becomes a constellation of modest lights. Hearths burning dimly in the dark, each one a little island of endurance. But between those islands, there are bridges, invisible but real, a memory of kindness given, a promise unspoken to return it. And when spring comes, and it will, always later than you want but sooner than you expect, these acts of quiet generosity are not forgotten. They are folded into the story of the village, a story not of heroes or miracles, but of neighbors, people who had nothing and gave anyway, people who endured not by clutching what little they had, but by opening their hands just enough to let someone else in. Because in the end, the warmth that saves you isn't always fire. It's the warmth of being remembered, of not being alone, of knowing, even in the frozen dark, that someone is thinking of you, and that if you knocked, no matter how late, no matter how cold, someone would answer. The manor's woodpile, desperation and risk. Topic: how medieval peasants survived the coldest nights of the month. Tense, dramatic, moral. Style: paragraph-based, voice-over narration. Length: 1,000 words. There comes a point in the coldest stretch of winter when the firewood runs low. Not just low, gone. Nothing left in the pile behind the door but a scatter of bark and splinters. The branches gathered in autumn burn too fast. The damp logs from the hedgerows turn to smoke and steam. Now there is only cold, and the question no one dares speak aloud: what now? For many peasants, there is no easy answer. The forest, once theirs in name if not in safety, now belongs to the Lord. The animals in it, the mushrooms beneath the leaf rot, even the fallen branches on the ground, technically his, technically forbidden. The manor's woodpile, stacked high and dry beneath thatched shelter near the great hall, is a monument to this injustice. A pyramid of comfort guarded by law and fear, close enough to see, close enough to crave, but not close enough to claim. Still, people try. Sometimes they ask first, a bowed head, a humble plea. Just a few logs, they might say, shivering before the steward at the manor gate. My children are sick, my fire's out, I'll work extra come spring. Sometimes the request is met with pity, more often with silence, or worse, threats. Wood is wealth, and wealth does not share itself easily. The Lord has his own hearth to keep warm, his own meat to roast, his own wine to mull. Your suffering does not alter that equation, and so some beg, some barter, some risk, because cold is a tyrant, and it drives good people toward bad choices. At night, when the wind howls over the field and the stars burn sharp above the thatched roofs, a figure might slip out of a darkened hut, their footsteps muffled by snow, their breath caught tight in their chest. Not a thief by trade, just a father, a daughter, a brother who wants to see morning. They know where the stack is. They've seen it while delivering eggs or leading pigs or serving at feast days. They know which gate stays loose, which dog sleeps heavy. They move like shadows, one log, maybe two, enough to make the night survivable. Some make it back, some don't. There are stories, some whispered, some true, of those caught in the act. A hand lopped off for stealing the Lord's property. A boy whipped until his back ran red. then cast into the snow to crawl home. A family evicted, left to the mercy of the woods they once dared enter. These are not tales to entertain, they are warnings. Lessons passed from parent to child like heirlooms. But still, the temptation returns with every frostbitten toe, with every infant cry in the night, with every brittle breath taken in the dark. Candle ends, light that cannot be replaced. In the long, biting winter nights, light is a treasure more fragile than warmth, more fleeting than breath. Candles burn low. The wick curls black, the flame flickers, then shrinks, until it is nothing but a stubborn glow on a stub of wax. A candle end. A fragile shard of illumination in the gathering dark. For a medieval peasant, this small light is more than just a tool. It is a marker of time, hope, and dwindling comfort. Beeswax was never easy to come by. It was golden and rich, produced by the labor of countless insects beyond human reach, gathered painstakingly by those who kept hives or traded for it in market towns. Few peasants could afford pure beeswax candles. Most relied on tallow, fat from animals, thick and smoky. Even tallow candles were luxuries, burnt sparingly, saved for moments when darkness pressed too close to bear. And as the nights grew longer, as cold crept deeper into bones and walls, the precious candlelight was rationed with care, weighed against need. The burning candle was a silent companion, one that gave and took away with equal measure. As it melted, it seemed to consume the very hopes of the household. Each wick length lost was a moment lost, an evening shortened, an hour swallowed by shadows. The light's slow retreat was a quiet reminder that night was eternal, or so it seemed, that the cold would not ease, that the world outside held no mercy. When the last candle stub flickered its final breath, the darkness took its place. Not sudden, not jarring, but a soft swallowing like a tide pulling back from the shore. The room transformed. Familiar shapes vanished. The fire's warmth retreated into an amber island surrounded by gloom. Hands groped for blankets in each other. The night became a thick, living thing, pressing against faces and ears. It was no longer just absence of light, it was presence. Cold, silence, waiting. In this shadowed world, eyes adjusted slowly, searching for outlines in the dim. Movement slowed, words ceased. Breath was held, then released in quiet sighs. The night was both enemy and ally, dangerous to the body, yet a veil for secrets, for whispered prayers, for the peace of surrender. Without light, the family learned new rhythms. The pulse of life was counted not in hours, but in heartbeats and moments. Children feared the dark in their way, small cries muffled under woolen blankets, clinging to the known warmth of a mother's side. Adults, too, held quiet terrors, fear of cold, of sickness, of the thin line between endurance and collapse. Yet there was a strange dignity in facing the dark without complaint. The candle's end was not just loss, it was also acceptance. A bow to limits, a moment of humility before the relentless march of night. Sometimes, the darkness encouraged memory. Without distraction, minds turned inward, toward stories told by firelight long gone, toward faces now distant or vanished, toward dreams that shimmered faintly like stars beyond the thatched roof. The silence invited reflection on all that warmth and light had once promised, and all that the coming dawn might still bring. It was a quiet communion with the past, the unseen and the unknown. The extinguished candle also marked time's cruel passing. Winter was measured in the slow consumption of light, in the shrinking circle of safe glow. As the stub shortened, so did the patience of bodies grown weary from endless waiting. The eyes grew heavy. The backs ached from crouching close to frozen hearts. The hands trembled in anticipation of morning's fragile promise. Yet even as darkness settled like a shroud, there was an unspoken understanding. Light would return. The sun, though distant, was inevitable. And until then, the darkness was a shared experience, an embrace of the night's weight, softened by the closeness of those who huddled together, breathing the same thin air, waiting for the candle to be lit once more. So when the candle ended, the family did not despair outright. They closed their eyes against the void, drew strength from silence, and carried the night within them, until light returned, or until the cold finally claimed its due. Because in those darkest hours, it was not the light they held on to, but each other. Stories by firelight, folk tales for frozen nights. When the wind rattles the shutters and the coals have burned low, and no one dares step outside for more wood, something else rises in place of fire. Stories. In the deepest dark of a medieval winter night, after the chores are done and the thin stew is gone, when the walls seem to close in and the cold presses from every angle, the firelight flickers not only against the timber beams, but across the imagination. The telling begins without fanfare. A father might clear his throat, a grandmother might shift in her place by the hearth, a child might ask, "Tell the one about the girl and the fox." And so, the hush of the room breaks into a dance of words. Folk tales pass from mouth to ear like heirlooms, worn smooth with use, reshaped with each telling, but always carrying warmth. Warmth not of flame, but of memory, tradition, and shared belief in something beyond the cold. They tell of saints who walk barefoot across snow without leaving a print, of dragons sleeping beneath hills, their breath rising through the earth as mist, of forest spirits who guard lost travelers and whisper secrets to those who listen, of clever girls who outwit devils, of talking animals, of hidden treasure buried where the frost never melts. These are not just diversions. They are blankets for the soul, insulation for the mind when fingers grow numb, and there is nothing left to do but wait for morning. The youngest listen wide-eyed, clutching each other, shivering not from fear, but from enchantment. Even the older ones, even the tired ones, lean in, because everyone remembers a night when a story was the only thing that kept the dark from winning. And so they let the tales roll over them like firelight, golden, flickering, ephemeral. Some stories have morals tucked in them, like embers buried deep in ash. Be humble, be kind, be brave. Others simply exist to spark wonder, to remind the listener that there is more to the world than hunger and hardship. And some, especially on the coldest nights, carry a hush of mourning, tales of lost lovers, vanished villages, or ghostly shepherds who still walk the hills by moonlight. These tales are not meant to frighten, not really. They are meant to connect to the past, to the unknown, to something larger than a peasant's thatched roof and threadbare cloak. The fire crackles in response, as though it knows the words. Shadows dance along the walls, becoming wolves or witches, angels or owls. The line between the room and the world of the tale begins to blur. And for a moment, even the oldest peasants, those who have heard these stories 100 times, believe again. And belief matters. In a world with no books, no maps, no certainty, stories are the framework of reality. They teach what's possible and what's not, what's good and what's dangerous. They explain the stars and the seasons, the wind and the wolves. They fill in the gaps left by silence and snow. And they give meaning to suffering, because if the woodcutter's son can survive a cursed forest, then surely a family can survive one more frozen night. Some of these stories come with chants or songs, hummed low around the fire like spells. The rhythm of the words, the lilt of a voice, it's as much comfort as the tale itself. And sometimes there is laughter, not loud but real, a crooked grin at a trickster fox, a chuckle when the youngest child guesses the ending before the storyteller gets there. Laughter like a puff of smoke, rising and vanishing, but still warming the air. Even when the fire dwindles to a whisper of red, the stories linger. The last lines are spoken softly, as if afraid to wake the night. Children curl into sleep with dragons at their backs and saints in their dreams. The storyteller falls silent, rubbing their hands together slowly, not because they're cold, but because the telling has ended, and there's nothing left to do but wait for dawn. Outside, the forest creaks beneath the weight of snow. Somewhere, an owl calls. But inside the cottage, the world is held together by stories, thin threads of magic strong enough to hold back the dark. And maybe that's how people survive those endless bitter nights, not just with fire, not just with food, but with tales told in the hush between heartbeats, stories that stitched one winter to the next, stories that kept hope alive when even the wood had given out. So if you ever find yourself in darkness so complete that even your breath feels brittle, remember this: the fire may fade, the cold may press in, but the right story, told by the right voice, can still keep you warm. Midwinter Festival, bread, fire, and a moment of joy. Once a year, just as the cold feels deepest, when the breath of winter has long since taken root in the bones of every cottage, when the light seems weakest and hope feels as brittle as frost-covered branches, the village stirs for something different, something rare. It is not a feast in the grand sense. There is no gold, no glittering procession, no nobles dressed in velvet. But to the people of the village, this one night might as well be a miracle, the Midwinter Festival. There's no fixed date. It comes when the elders say it's time, when the dark has lasted too long and spirits need lifting. It begins quietly, a murmur at the well, a whisper from house to house, children with eyes lit like lanterns carrying word through the winding paths. Tonight, at the square, the preparations are humble but purposeful. A few precious loaves of bread, shaped with care, a bundle of dried herbs saved just for this. A fire kindled not in the hearth of a single home, but in the village's heart, the open square where even the poorest soul can gather without shame. As the sun falls beneath its winter arc, the village begins to glow, not with heat, but with anticipation. Families step out wrapped in every layer they own. Scarves thick with years of mending, mittens stiff with age. But faces carry something not often seen in winter, smiles. There's laughter, tentative at first, like a muscle unused. A child's giggle becomes a song that tugs at the corners of mouths hardened by hardship. At the center of it all, the fire. Taller than a man, wide enough for a circle of warmth, its flames crackle with more than just heat. They crackle with memory, with meaning, with shared breath. Fire in winter isn't just survival, it's symbol. It says, we are still here. We have made it this far. Bread is passed around, not enough to fill every belly perhaps, but enough to remind every hand what it means to give and receive. There are special shapes, marked with crosses or stars, or twisted into knots that children tug apart. Some loaves are sweetened barely, with dried fruit or a drizzle of honey hoarded since autumn. These are treasures, and they are shared freely. Someone begins to hum, then sing. The melodies are old, older than the stones of the well, older than the Lord's name. They rise from lips like steam from cider, curling upward into the night. Some songs tell of saints, others tell of sun returning. Some are nonsense ditties meant only to make children dance and mothers laugh. But all are sacred in their own way. There might be music, pipes carved from elder wood, a battered drum, or a harp with more broken strings than whole. But somehow, the music fills the space between stars. Feet stamp the earth in slow rhythm, more to stay warm than for grace. But even that becomes its own kind of dance. For one night, no one is alone. The widow without family stands beside the shepherd with 10 children. The old man who never speaks finds himself humming beside the miller's boy. The cold is still there, it never truly leaves, but it becomes background, a distant thing outside the circle of flame and song. The festival isn't grand, but it is good. There may be tales told or blessings spoken. Someone may rise to thank the saints or to recall a harvest long gone. And for a brief moment, just long enough for frost to forget itself, the people of the village remember what joy feels like. Children chase each other, breath like smoke trailing behind them. Young lovers steal glances, their hands brushing beneath layers of wool. A mother holds her baby close and whispers the old lullaby her own mother once sang beside a fire just like this. The stars seem to come closer. The moon, full and sharp-edged, casts silver over the snow, and every roof and branch becomes a cathedral. And still, the fire burns. Bread is broken, old rivalries forgotten, hands are extended. Joy is not loud here, not lavish, but it is real, and that is enough. Eventually, the fire begins to sink. Embers glow like fallen stars, and voices grow soft. Parents gather sleepy children. A last song is sung, slow and low, almost a prayer. And then, with great tenderness, the fire is allowed to fade. No one wants to leave, but all must return to their darkened huts, to beds lined with straw and dreams tucked beneath patched quilts. Yet something follows them home, something light. A feeling that, even in the longest night of the year, even in a life ruled by frost and fear and famine, there can still be this. One evening of togetherness, one spark against the vast cold. In the days that follow, nothing is easier. The snow still falls, the larder is still lean, but something lingers. A warmth that came not from the fire, but from the nearness of others, the memory of song, the sweetness of shared bread. And next winter, when the night again grows long, the village will whisper once more, tonight at the square.